Before we dive into the symptoms, let's take a moment to understand what complex PTSD is. It's also known as complex trauma or childhood trauma. And unlike regular PTSD, which is typically linked to a single traumatic event, complex trauma develops from repeated trauma over time, and that's often in childhood, especially in our developmental years, which is birth to 8 years old. Now, this could be prolonged abuse, neglect, or growing up in a chaotic environment. It's not always horror story stuff, but oftentimes it is. And the effects of trauma can be deeply ingrained within us, influencing how we see ourselves, others, and the world around us. Hi there. If you're just joining us, I'm Kerri McKenna Reece, a trauma recovery coach, accredited certified complex trauma trainer, and a mentor, healing out loud so you don't have to. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that's incredibly important, but often misunderstood, and that's complex trauma. If you've ever wondered whether your experiences as an adult, your actions or reactions might be linked to your childhood, or if you're just curious about it and want to be in the know, then keep watching. I've met a lot of people over the years that do not realize that their actions, reactions, behaviors come from unresolved childhood trauma. Many of them say they had a normal childhood, yet they've spent their whole life every day feeling like they are a part of the problem and they don't understand why. It's in the midst of that struggle, the discontentment and failing relationships, that they want to invest in truly getting to know themselves. They want to rest in their authenticity and honor their own needs and cultivate healthy relationships, whether it be personally or professionally. As a trauma survivor myself, I relate to this very well. I struggled in relationships and didn't realize how I was contributing to the dysfunction. I lived life every day without boundaries, neglecting my own needs. And this journey of exploring and recovering from the trauma I suffered in my childhood helped me to see the unhealthy, the lies or untrue beliefs I carried and how it was affecting my life. With all that being said, let's explore 12 common symptoms of complex trauma that often stem from childhood. And hopefully, this will help you discover you, or what I like to refer to as coming home to yourself. This comfortable standing and living in your truth without the conflict of fear, shame, guilt, and self doubt. Now, let's start with emotional flashbacks. Unlike regular flashbacks, emotional flashbacks don't necessarily come with a clear conscious memory. Have you ever suddenly felt an overwhelming anger, fear, shame, or sadness without knowing why? You see, the brain, it stores memories in different locations. The amygdala stores emotional memories, while the hippocampus stores conscious memories. When we have unhealed trauma, we are emotionally reliving past events without a clear visual memory that lets us know that it's actually the past we're reacting to rather than the present. So when an upsetting event happens, our nervous system is transported back to an unhealed traumatic event, a moment when we felt similar emotions. It's the past, but we actually think we're upset with the person in front of us, with the situation that's going on. And this leads us into chronic anxiety and hypervigilance, which is actually next on our list. Do you ever feel constantly on edge as if something bad is about to happen? Are you always waiting for the ball to drop when things are good in your life? This is a hallmark of complex trauma. This hypervigilance is your nervous system staying stuck in survival mode, always scanning for danger. Your brain is all about survival, and it works closely with your nervous system to keep you safe. And when you experience repeated trauma, or if you grow up in a toxic environment where you never felt safe, loved, valued, or nurtured, your nervous system, it can get stuck expecting danger at any moment. It's ready to do whatever it needs to do to give you a felt sense of safety. Now, trust is another common symptom of complex PTSD or complex trauma. It's difficulty trusting others. For trauma survivors, trusting themselves is incredibly difficult, and trusting others is incredibly hard as well. So, building and maintaining trustworthy relationships is a challenge because complex trauma leads to deep mistrust, making relationships challenging. If you didn't feel you were unconditionally loved and accepted by your own parents or caregivers, why would you trust being honored and respected by others? We constantly fear being abandoned, betrayed, or harmed. And in every relationship, it's one foot in the door, one foot out, fearing our love in some way will be violated. Violation of our love is the only love we've ever known. And we don't know love that feels any other way if we've never been shown it, right? Now, let's talk about self view. Trauma survivors often have a persistent negative self view. We struggle with feelings of worthlessness or believe we are bad at our core. This internalized shame is one of the most painful aspects of complex trauma. The love bestowed upon us by our parents, we internalize as our own worth. When our parents are unable to love us fully or unconditionally, we receive mixed messages. We can be confused about who we are, or worse, believing that everything about us is bad or wrong, that we are truly unlovable, and we internalize mistakes as shameful things, telling us we're bad and no good, when in reality, mistakes are how we learn. They shouldn't even be called mistakes. They should be called learning curves, right? We can embrace choices we're not happy with as opportunities for growth when we are loved unconditionally as a child. And through that, we're able to form a healthy and positive understanding of love and of who we are. So being loved unconditionally as a child for all the ways we are is the first step to a foundation of a content life. And it's the greatest example of love and emotional maturity. Now let's talk about explosive or uncontrollable anger. Did you ever have intense anger that seems to come out of nowhere? Does that ever happen to you? That's a sign of complex trauma. Anger is a defense mechanism. It's masking deeper feelings of hurt or fear. Now, we can become explosive when our anxiety kicks in and our nervous system gets dysregulated. And that's because as children, we were placed in situations much too big for us to handle without someone to help us, without someone to nurture us and help us navigate the situation. We were never taught how to manage such big, overwhelming emotions. So here we are as adults, and we don't know what to do with them. The important thing here is to learn about our own personal emotional intelligence. It's gaining an awareness of what's going on internally for us. What has you feeling threatened? Are you actually being threatened or only afraid you might be? Are you safe? What do you need? How can you choose to honor your needs and have healthy boundaries in healthy ways? This leads us to emotional numbness and detachment. Now, when everything feels too big, you might go in the other direction and shut down, finding it hard to feel anything at all. Happiness, sadness, even love. Emotional numbness is your brain's way of protecting you from overwhelming pain, from feeling the emotions you don't want to feel because you don't want to address them. Now, we learn how to numb ourselves out as children, how not to feel because we're little and we don't have the emotional maturity or the skills to address the pain of the violation we're dealing with. And we've been taught to suppress our emotions a lot and to view them as a weakness. So between not knowing how to handle our emotions and believing they're a sign of weakness, numbing is the only thing we can do. And we don't know any different. Now, this leads us into talking about isolation and loneliness. Do you ever find yourself feeling alone, even if you're in a crowd? Withdrawing from others is a sure sign of complex trauma, either because you don't feel understood, you're not sure how to relate with them, maybe your life experience seems so different from everyone else's, or maybe you truly find it hard to connect with them because of the way your love has been so violated. When you've never had an example of true healthy connection, you don't know how to form one. And when you've never been loved in a healthy way, you don't know how to love yourself or teach others how to love you. And when you didn't grow up in a home with boundaries or your boundaries were never honored, you don't know how to have them, communicate them, or require them to be honored in your relationships as an adult. And boundaries is actually our next topic, or difficulty with boundaries. Did you have boundaries growing up? Were you taught about boundaries? Do you know how to establish them and communicate them? Because establishing healthy boundaries, it can be very tough. You might either have very rigid boundaries, pushing people away, or overly porous ones, letting people in too much and then getting hurt. Now, let's talk about self-destructive behaviors. That's number 9 on the list. Some people with complex trauma, they turn to self-harm, substance abuse, or other risky behaviors as a way to cope with overwhelming emotions or the need for connection. These behaviors, they're a cry for help. They're not a sign of weakness. We were never taught how to understand or communicate our needs, how to get our very real needs met. And if we don't understand ourselves or our needs, how can we possibly meet them? This actually leads us to chronic feelings of guilt or shame. You might find yourself feeling guilty or ashamed all the time, even when you haven't done anything wrong. This is trauma speaking, not the truth about who you are. As young children, we take on a trauma identity, believing that we are the problem. That distorts our perception throughout life and has us feeling bad about ourselves. It has us feeling as if we are to blame, as if we're somehow deficient. As children, when our needs are not consistently met, we internalize that and believe that we're not worthy and that we are broken or flawed somehow. Now, disassociation is next on our list, and this goes in alignment with emotional numbing and detachment, yet it's very different. Numbing out is one way we might disassociate. Disassociation in any form is how we detach from the traumatic event while it's happening. It's a psychological process that can involve a sense of detachment. This is a coping tool our system learns, and we'll continue using it throughout life when overwhelmed and certainly when triggered and experience an emotional flashback. At the milder and more common end, disassociation can look like tunnel vision while driving, getting lost in thought and spacing out. It's in those moments you arrive somewhere and don't remember driving there. And we all do this to some degree. What matters is whether or not it interferes with functionality. At the extreme end, disassociation can sometimes feel like being so detached from yourself. It can feel as if you're witnessing yourself as a different person, or you can feel detached from reality as if you're witnessing yourself in someone else's reality. Do you lose time? Do you ever feel disconnected from your surroundings or like you're watching yourself from the outside? Okay, the last symptom we're going to touch on is perfectionism and people pleasing. Most people with complex trauma develop perfectionistic tendencies or become chronic controllers or people pleasers, believing that if they're perfect or helpful enough, they'll finally be safe, loved, wanted, and valued. Recognizing all of these symptoms is the first step towards healing. If any of these resonate with you, just know that you're not alone and help is available. Healing from complex trauma, it is possible, though it can take time and patience. Find a trauma recovery coach that provides you a connection you need to feel safe to start your healing journey, or find a group that you can join. Thank you so much for watching and taking the time to learn more about complex trauma and possibly yourself. If this video resonated with you or you think it might help someone else, please share it, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for more content on complex trauma, healing, and personal growth. Remember, it's a journey, and every step forward counts. You deserve to feel safe, loved, and whole. Until next time, take care.